Hi, this is Anna Bevan Gravely with NCFREE, and I am joined by Rick Padgett, who is running in Senate District 22. Rick, before we get started, is there anything you'd like to share with our members?
Well, yes. First of all, thank you for inviting me for this. It's it's an honor to be able to sit before the public and just tell them what you think and let them hear what your thought process is. It's so many times a day in the political arena, what you hear is somebody's spin or a one-liner about an individual, and that one line may capture them and with their thought and opinions of a candidate, and it'll last the entire campaign, when in reality that one line really had nothing to do with what we're trying to accomplish as candidates. So I really enjoy the fact that we have open access here, and that you gave us the invite that we could come out there and my team can be represented in the process. So thank you very much. And thank you to the voters for taking time to watch.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I'm just going to dive into the questions.
Sure.
Have you ever owned a business or been in a management position within a business?
I very much have. I work for the sheriff's office locally here in Durham, and I started back in 1984. Prior to that, I was in the military. I served with the 101st Airborne Division and the 3rd Infantry Division over in Germany, while stationed with the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I came into law enforcement in 1984, and when I did that, I had some experience with mental health. We all started in the jail, and some of the things that you really see in the jail do start where the mental health is right there in the jail system. So I worked my way up from that position, from the jail, through the ranks, went to patrol. I did everything you can imagine in a sheriff's office, to include internal affairs on 2 different times. Internal affairs is not always the favorite spot to be, because it's kind of like mom and dad sit there watching and making sure everything gets done. And sometimes mom has to be the heavy and sometimes dad has to be the heavy, but that's internal affairs. That's just the way it is. It keeps us in check. It's a great balance, and it's something that we do offer into law enforcement and what goes on. And I was trusted to do that. In the meantime, I say that covered 475 people in an agency. I also became an administrative assistant to the sheriff, which covered those 475 officers also. And also I was a training commander that also dealt with certifications and state mandated regulations and supervised and did, you name it, we did it. The only thing that I can truly say that I never did, and this was really by choice, was I never worked as a undercover drug officer, never went into the drug environment other than as a school liaison, where we were actually going to schools and taking out some firearms and some drugs and any other contraband that needed to come out of school. So yeah, I've had plenty of experience. And then I started an organization with 2 other law enforcement officers, North Carolina Sheriff Police Alliance, and we represent law enforcement officers in time of crisis. So we have serious car wrecks, it could be shootings, some discipline cases, things like that. What we are not is a union, though. And we don't walk and talk like we're an organization that we're going to send in the paratroopers to take over a law enforcement agency. What we find out is we can mediate with those in charge and come to a reasonable conclusion in most cases that works for everybody. Because sometimes, as you know, officers make mistakes because we're not perfect. None of us are perfect. But our organization in particular, helps the officer when he's made a mistake to realize that, hey, this was a mistake. Let's go in there and let's explain that what we're going to do better and see if that'll help your position with your agency. And in more cases than not, we've been very successful, and we've kept a lot of things out of any kind of legal issues. So, yeah. So awesome. we manage our time and our resources.
Awesome. Thank you. Would you say that the current level of federal and state taxation is too high, too low, or just about right?
Well, I think our biggest problem is I think it tends to be too high because we're trying to offer too many things to too many people. For the lack of a better word, I think we offer dreams and not reality. And I say that it's because everybody loves a great dream. think about it. Everybody loves a great dream, but people wake up screaming at nightmares. So when you look at when we're focused on the wrong things, our taxes, our tax system is punishing the successful in many cases and rewarding many of the people, or that aren't really out on the boots on the ground. They're not really putting as much into it as some of the businesses are. Yet we have people out there that are worthy of being in a system that not always being taken care of. So I think we have a problem with our tax system and our employment process, is that, we give money to the state. Well, no, let me take it back. Taxes, they take money that's provided to the state or to the federal government, and we don't really have a lot to do with what they do with it except through our politicians. And many times when you have one politician who's representing you in that infrastructure, whether it's an infrastructure bill or whatever it is, and he's not representing you, you're not getting out of your taxes what you're putting into it. There's not a fair exchange of process. And I think that, when you look at what the federal government does, what the state government does, the state wants 100% separation of powers. You can't tell us what to do. Stay out of our business. But as soon as the stuff hits the fan, they start screaming, "Oh, send us the life raft, send in helicopters, send everything you got. We need help." Well, here's the problem with that. That's kind of like, taking everything from everybody and never giving anything back in return. I don't think the federal government should take over the states by no means. But also, I don't think the state should reach out every time there's a little crisis or any kind of crisis, whether it's a small one or a big one, and demand something when they're not producing themselves, i.e. budgets. If they're misusing their budget and they're using it for all the wrong things and they're about to go bankrupt, I don't think an organization or any company or business would be allowed to get away with reaching out to anybody and saying, "Help us out and save us," when in reality, state governments may get themselves in trouble, or cities or whatever, and then all of a sudden they want the federal government to bail them out. And when the federal government says, "No, we're not going to do it," first thing they start screaming is, "Well, you're obligated to do it." Well, no, you're not. If you're doing things that you're not supposed to do, it's the same thing as getting a checkbook and bouncing checks all over the place. How do we cover those? Do we do that for the average person in the family? Absolutely not. So we shouldn't be covering the bounce checks or the potential bounce checks of a state or any local government. That's just, to me, it's common sense. It's just reality. We as individuals, we can't do it, so our government shouldn't be able to just throw money out there and say, "Oh, well, we'll get it from the state. We'll just scream and yell, or we'll get it from the federal government." So yeah, I think we got some work to say. I'm for a flat tax, by the way. I think we ought to all be flat taxed, and I don't think that, because people want to argue that, and I'm not going to argue. My theory is this: if I'm a $1 billion corporation and I have to pay a 15% tax, well, I'm a $1 billion corporation. No loopholes. You don't get any money back. You're going to pay a flat tax, whatever it is. But the average American citizen or North Carolina resident pays 15%. To me, it's equal. And people say, the distribution concept, well, it's not fair because people are not making as much money. But if you look at it, it is fair, because reality is everybody's paying the same, and you're based on what you're paying, what your earning income is. So, federal, state, I think we ought to be flat tax.
Thank you. That adds, that adds a lot of clarity. Thank you. Do you feel it's appropriate for state or local governments to offer incentives to private businesses in consideration of locating, expanding, or conducting business in a specific area of the state?
No, not in its current form, and I'll tell you why. Businesses give no guarantees to where the workforce comes from, no guarantees of the workforce numbers, how long they'll remain here, no proof of most cases where there's incentive affected to the people of the area. Most of the time, they donate to a bigger scale of activities that do not really affect the communities. you'll hear them say, well, you know, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Okay, you can tell me you're going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Problem
is, there's too many businesses that'll come in and say, well, you give us this and we'll do this. Problem is, we run off a tax-based system.
Mm-hmm.
And as a tax base, you have to have a certain amount of money to pay for those businesses. And if you reach out there and you bring in businesses and then you give them a free run on your local infrastructure and they tear everything down, or they bring in new employees from other states and you're not able to capitalize on local employment numbers, all you've done is increase the volume of people coming into that area. You've done your community a disservice because you're not increasing your tax base. I don't think, and I understand people in the rural areas, you want it, and you got to have it. But all the promises in the world, they're not coming if they don't have an infrastructure. You can't have an infrastructure if you don't have a solid tax base. Mm-hmm. So I think too many times companies will look for the free ride, and they'll get that free ride, and they'll promise everything in the world. But the reality is they get what they want, and then something happens and they disappear. You're hung with everything that they've left behind as a community. And what do you do with it? I look at places like some of the places in Detroit or any of these incentives that you may get. Mm-hmm. I don't think the taxpayer should be taking on the expenses for big billion-dollar corporations. No, I think that's not even a reasonable request. And I think that local government that does that, we have a research. Triangle Park did that back in the 60s, took it in the 70s. Jim Hunt was the governor, and he laid out all these incentives. But in the long run, when these companies leave, you have empty buildings that you have to maintain. You have empty buildings that you board up, and that does nothing for a community. People don't buy. They don't want it. They don't want to be around it. I worked 35 years in law enforcement. It doesn't change. The building sits there. The grass grows up. People don't want to come to that. And a lot of people don't want to rent those buildings. They don't want to pay the rates. And because if you put somebody in there who owns it, has got a lot to make up. And they're going to make it up on the next tenant, and the next tenant is not going to be responsible.
Yeah. Well, thank you. How would you describe the principles of free enterprise?
I think, from a standpoint, the U.S. economic system of free enterprise operates kind of according to the 5 main principles. Mm-hmm. And that would be freedom to choose our businesses, mm-hmm. right to private property, the profit motive, competition, and the consumer. Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at that, you pretty much have to have every bit of it. When you look at that, I call that capitalism, because think about it. You can prosper in a capitalist society. You can't prosper in anything else. There's nothing out there that will allow you to prosper independently based on what we do as businesses, or what you do when you choose to support your business. You hear a lot of people, local business. And I think recently with the president, he's always promoted now, we've got to work within our country to support our businesses. And I think that's a big process under the concept of, the America First. Well, absolutely. I think when you yield everything to everybody else, what happens is they have a greater amount of power. You take somebody like China, where they're doing all the medications. What happens if they decide they want to cripple our country and they just want to stop all the medications? Mm. How long do you think it takes us, and I say this to anybody listening, how long will it take us to rebound from that? You think the pandemic can be bad? Mm. Think about if they just decided to choke us out with the medications that they send over here, and that'll be a game changer. Because all of a sudden, you got somebody in your family, whether it's a mother, father, or grandmother, sitting there, and it only takes days. It only takes to make a difference. It's not 14 days to determine if. 2 days can make a big difference. 2 days will determine if. So I think we can't yield. We're a capitalist society. That's just a fact. We can't yield our wares to anybody else. That's just you can't provide to your family. You just can't do it. Anything else is a very socialistic idea. And we got a feeling of that when the pandemic first started, where everybody was running, getting because they had this big fear that the world was coming to the end. And the reality was it's not coming to the end, but if everybody were reasonable, still doing what they needed to do and not being over animated on what they think was going to happen, you wouldn't have the rush of things that you're missing now. It'd be a normal approach to life in itself. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And in your opinion, what is the appropriate balance in the scope of federal and state regulatory requirements on business? And what, in your opinion, is the best way to balance the appropriate protections without impugning economic vitality?
I think federalism, as it describes the kind of system, it's a shared governance. I mean, it's between the national and the state governments. The states or federal governments have both the exclusive and concurrent powers, which help explain any kind of negotiations over the balance, that they've had previously. But the federal government can encourage the adoption of policies, state level, they do that through the federal aid programs, as we've seen recently and nationally of, well, if you don't do this, you won't get that. And I have concerns with that because I don't, and I agree with the president is, if you're supposed to do something and we give you federal funding for that, and you decide that you don't want to do that, you owe that money back to the federal government, or you don't get any more money. And all the lawsuits in the world and all the organizations that don't like it, it's a hard line for me, because you go into an agreement, that's the agreement. You can't change it. You do that with a car payment, you do that with your car, your house, what's the bank going to do? Well, same thing the government should do. If you default based on the agreement, there are consequences for that. The government, think about it, the government should always hold the state 100% accountable for any federal funding. And that includes funding if they're not in compliance with any kind of issues that they're supposed to be in compliance with. So I think, it gets back to that concept of, I hate to keep going back to it. It's like if dad and mom give you an allowance and they say, as long as you're being good and you're doing everything I ask you to do, and you're cleaning your room as a child, and you come along the way, and all of a sudden one day you decide, I'm not going to do that, and then you turn around and expect me as a mom or a dad to give you that money because you didn't accomplish anything which you're supposed to do. And then you get people who want to say, don't worry about it, he's just a kid, he's learning. No, he's learning nothing. He's learning how to circumvent the system. And if they do that at that age, they'll continue to do that. And I think that's what's happened. We've got too many people who've grown up and lived in that environment, and now they're in these other entities that are constantly going back and you're having these issues.
I never got an allowance growing up.
Well, neither I.
My friends did, and I was like, I don't understand what this thing that you call an allowance is. We did chores for the pleasure of eating my mother's food.
See, that's the thing. I was like, when I was growing up, I'd hear people say, well, I get a $2 allowance. I'm like, what? Why do you get a $2 allowance? Because I make my bed and I take out the garbage. Well, doggone. You think your mom can talk to my mom? Because something's not happening in my house like that. We're not, I had to earn money. My first job was, I was 13 years old, and my uncle said, hey, son, you want a job? Yeah, come with me. He owned a body shop. He said, I'm going to teach you something. I said, man, I'm 13. I want to learn to be a body guy. I get there and he goes, I'm building a house over in that field over there, and I got so many rocks in there. I got to get them out. He said, I need you to take that wheelbarrow over there and pick up all the rocks you get. I need you to go all week. When you get done, at the end of the week, I'm going to pay you. I said, you mean I'm not going to help sand cars or nothing? He said, no, I got that under control. I want you to do this. So every morning he'd pick me up, and I'd go over there and I'd pick up these rocks, and I'd work until he got tired. And I was taking these wheelbarrows over there, and I was dumping rocks. And at the end of the week, and this was back in 1974.
Sure.
He gave me $10. Now, $10 back then was okay. It was kind of like probably, it was like $20 is today. It was kind of a maybe 25. But think about this. I'm out there all week, and I'm out there more than 40 hours. And at the end of the week, I look back and I go, hey, this is all I got for this. I said, is this it? He said, well, yeah. He says, I have business expenses too. And I thought, wow. And I never realized. So later on in life, he said, laughed at me one day. He goes, he said, I didn't need you to pick the box. You know, a house never went up there. I said, yeah, I was wondering about that. He said, I just wanted to teach you the value of hard work and a dollar. I said, you mean I've been mad at you all this time? And he said, I said, well, as I grew up, I didn't get mad at you because I realized. He says, I said, but I never really talked to you about that. He said, well, he said, but realize, he said, things aren't easy. You're not always going to get what you want. But the reality is you got to get what you can get, because sometimes if that's all you can get to survive, he said, what I want to teach you is that when you have a family one day, you may have to result in doing things like that to take care of them. And, that was a pretty strong lesson. I mean, I wasn't having fun with that lesson at the time, but I understand it today.
Yeah.
It was a real blast.
Man, well, thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing a little bit more about you with our members. Before we close out, where can we go to learn more about you?
You can go to www.rick4ncsenate.com. You can also go to @RickPadgettNC as for my Twitter account. And once you go to the website, you can also see my Twitter account and the Instagram account. The Instagram is rpadgett2020. So I'm running those right there. And then I'll be starting a podcast within the next couple of weeks. And it's probably going to be, and you're going to see it's going to say anything goes. And that's because there might be some lighthearted conversations, some fun things that we're going to be talking about. And there may be some heavy topics. So we want to make sure that we don't want to talk about all the politics and the end of the world issues that are always going to be coming every day, any day, and all day. So there are some great things happening. Problem is with everything that's going on now, nobody's hearing about it. And I think we as a society, we see so much bad and so much arguing from the political sides. Who's a Republican? Who's a Democrat? There's some issues out there that we all can share. We have to figure out what our common interests are and work on those and make them better. Then we can work on our bigger differences. And I think we have to start from the inside and work our way out. We can't come from the both sides on outside working our way in. And I think that we have more things in common than we probably realize. And I think that's where we have to start change. And we have to be willing to be fair, firm, but understand that we have to be very compassionate in everything we do, because one change in what we do as individuals or laws or things affects a whole generation of people and future generations to come.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great rest of the day, and good luck on the campaign trail.
Absolutely. And you'll see on my website coming up and everything. We still go with common sense values, and that's what we're working on. But one of the things I'm telling everybody in the campaign trail now is why we're doing this. It's one simple thing, because it matters. It matters to me. It matters to you. Whatever matters to you matters to me, matters to other people. So whatever the issue, whatever the topic, let's work together. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.